Welcome, everyone. My name is Ray Smock. I'm the director of the Robert C. Byrd Center for Legislative Studies here at Shepherd University in Shepherdstown, West Virginia. Here at the Byrd Center, our mission is to understand the Congress of the United States and study it. We also study the United States Constitution and the meaning of representative democracy. To achieve these goals, we hold events like this, and we also do research on Congress. This year we published a 2-volume study of major congressional investigations, starting with the first one in 1792 and going all the way up until the Hurricane Katrina inquiry in 2005. We are proud to be the curators of Senator Byrd's extensive papers, which are here in the archive. He is the longest serving senator and longest serving member of Congress in United States history, and we are very honored to be his curators. Senator Byrd was often asked by reporters, how many presidents have you served under? And he would correct them instantly with a little Constitution lesson. I have served with 11 presidents. I have served under none. Senator Byrd was one of the great champions of the United States Constitution. He was the last great orator of the Senate, famous for his speeches on the history of the Senate, his defense of the Constitution, and his principled opposition to the war in Iraq. He carried a copy of the Constitution in his pocket for years and never missed the opportunity to take it out and wave it at people and also cite from it. He had it memorized. He taught several generations of United States senators the importance of the Constitution and the rules of the Senate, and also the importance of the Constitution in the life of this nation. Back in 2005, Senator Byrd was here on this campus to kick off Constitution Day with a speech, and this is what he said in part that day. Not a day has passed in the history of this great republic in which the Constitution has not been important. The Senator's message is available outside this door, if those of you would like to pick it up, and also available on the Byrd Center website. He urged us that day to take responsibility to be good citizens. He also said that day, Plato observed that one of the penalties for refusing to participate in politics is that you end up being governed by your inferiors. And then he said, many people will respond to this warning with a ho-hum shrug of an attitude and say, well, what can I do? I'm just one insignificant little citizen. Martin Luther King was one insignificant citizen. Rosa Parks was one insignificant citizen. Susan B. Anthony. These people were not insignificant at all, and none of us are insignificant. It is up to us. We are the leaders of the future. Today we are honored and delighted to have as our Constitution Day speaker the distinguished actor, Mr. Richard Dreyfuss, who has appeared on television and theater and is especially known for his marvelous film career with such films as American Graffiti, Jaws, Close Encounters of a Third Kind, Mr. Holland's Opus, The Goodbye Girl, for which he won the Academy Award for Best Actor. His portrayal of Vice President Dick Cheney in the film W was absolutely astounding. And his most recent film, Red, with Bruce Willis and Morgan Freeman, opened just last year. Mr. Dreyfuss has done what Senator Byrd hoped many Americans would do. He stepped up to the plate and has become a serious participant in promoting the teaching of civics in American schools with the creation of the Dreyfuss Initiative. As Richard put it, we have to teach kids how to run this country before they are called upon to run it. Recently, Richard took time off from his artistic career to be a senior research fellow at Oxford University, where he debated at the Oxford Union. From his studies at Oxford, he got the idea to launch the Dreyfuss Initiative. He also serves as an advisor to the American Bar Association's Civic Education Initiative and is a member of the board of Common Cause, a nonprofit group founded in 1970 to foster public interest over the many special interests that too easily dominate political discourse and action these days. Earlier today, I was pleased to be at a ceremony in nearby Charlestown, West Virginia, a town named for George Washington's brother, where Richard Dreyfuss dedicated the historic buildings and property known as Happy Retreat, the 18th century home of Colonel Charles Washington, to be the future headquarters of the Dreyfuss Initiative's global outreach on the study of the Enlightenment, the ideas that shaped the founding of this nation and that helped transform the world. Richard's talk this evening is entitled "The Constitutional Convention and the Miracle of Democracy." There will be a reception following the program where you will all be able to meet with Mr. Dreyfuss, and he has agreed to take your questions following his remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to welcome Mr. Richard Dreyfuss.
Tech for the first time. I'm trying to do this from an iPad, so if you see me go like this, forgive me. Thank you very much for having me here, and I hope that at the end of this speech you'll get at least a shot of how urgent and important this message is, because I can see the end of the tunnel of the story of the United States, and it happens now and in this century, in the time of our grandchildren. And if we don't pay attention and do everything we can to keep it, our grandchildren will never believe that we ever had such a wonderful country. We are standing at a crossroads in our history, with the choice of a clear road back to the strong, confident society we've been, adult and mature, with realism and common sense, or an alternate path to a trivial, corny show of bunkin and card sharks, crooked gambling wheels of fortune, and pickpockets working us, the crowd, the marks, the rubes, listening to their never-ending patter as they escort us through and out. So hypnotized, we never noticed how stripped bare we were, wallets empty, car keys missing, and hearing the guffaws from the carnival inside, realizing it's too late to go back in there and ask them for what exactly? Tell them to give us our money back? We gave it to them. And when they took it, we didn't protest. So what's the point? This land was once the home of the one family that was more identified with the best of our character. The most admired name, inarguably, than all the other great men combined. George Washington slept here. He grew up here. And he grew up from a blank sheet of paper to the most honored of us all. He did what should never be forgotten. He created himself into the most thoughtful gentleman, the most filled with grace, filled with intelligence and humility. He was humble, though a crown of sovereignty was within his easy reach. He loved liberty more. When George III, it said, heard that he had twice turned away from power, the king said, if Mr. Washington has actually done that, then he would actually be the greatest man in the world. He gave every bit of the man that he had built within, all his mind, all his heart, all his strength, and his fortune. He risked all of that and more for the proposition that all people have the opportunity to live and govern themselves with liberty. Words fail to properly attribute the honor and gratitude we owe to such a person as George Washington. When we created President's Day, we lost both Washington and Lincoln, and we reduced Washington to the level of Warren Harding and Millard Fillmore. We should do everything possible to get his birthday celebrated separately so we could appreciate him individually and understand his singular, eccentric greatness. If we honor George Washington, then let us honor the virtues to which he subscribed. We can honor him and the principles for which he and his associates lived and died by simply reinstating those principles within the curriculum of our schools. No other work will do more for the future security of this nation and the world than to educate this citizenry about this great heritage and the responsibilities to which it is inseparably coupled. If our society is a river, we look to the headwaters, our children, as the source, the beginning of tomorrow. If they are taught the principles for which Washington fought, our children would lead us away from here, hopefully, before it's too late. We must teach these civic principles or say goodbye to the society we once held dear. What is technology without wisdom? What is strength of arms without moral character and restraint? What is economic might without prudence and forbearance? And what is the ability to read, write, and calculate without the knowledge and will to avoid the mistakes in our history? Or what is the ability to read, write, and calculate if we don't understand the civic actions that will secure our future and keep it on a prosperous trajectory? You cannot build the roof before you lay the foundation. Democracy in any incarnation is the only governing system that requires some engagement of the civil body. In one fashion or another, sooner or later, the sovereignty of the people is the difference between democracy and monarchy, theocracy, totalitarianism, divine right, or any other system that has been devised thus far, so that the people as sovereign, the responsible party who ultimately makes the final political decisions and is the sovereign ruler, is the irresistible sell to the world. And that makes democracy America's most responsible and successful product. Democracy argues that people are responsible for their own lives and can control their own lives, that they have a role in affecting their future, of improving their present, and of achieving participation in pursuit of their own happiness. People, however, are people, meaning that people, unlike jaguars, do not always work at peak efficiency. They don't always hunt the huntable, Jaguars don't laze about while the river runs dry just because it's a sunny day. That God has a cunning sense of humor is hinted at because democracy relies on people's thoughtfulness, and people can be a lazy, thoughtless bunch. Not all people all the time, as Lincoln might have said in some earlier draft, but certainly some people can sometimes be thoughtless or terrified and have done some pretty impressive damage while they have been such. For 100 years after the Civil War, it was considered perfectly all right to pull over to the side of the road and hang any black man, woman, or child that they might come across. And they did that at the rate of about 85 a month for 100 years. And any attempt to stop such lynching was defeated by a coalition of northern and southern and western politicians who reasonably concluded that that was an acceptable compromise. The way things got done, the way business as usual was done in national politics. And then one day, 100 years later, there was a 5-year civil rights struggle. And everyone in the country basically said, oh my God, what was that lynching thing? We must be crazy. And the reason I mention it here is that it illustrates how we can be so terribly wrong and not be aware. So that, if it's possible, are we in the democratic system meant to rely on people at their worst? Or should we do as some of the Constitution's creators did, train our brains and raise our abilities to higher levels of reason and clarity of thought, and work at attaining a high degree of competence at self-governance? We should give the young the tools they will need to be great sovereigns. Tools of reason and logic, civility, dissent, debate, clarity of thought, and critical analysis. These things can be taught, such as how do you explore the substance of an issue, rather than leaving such ability to chance or offering it up only to university students as an eccentric niche offering of higher education. How can we know the difference between propaganda and fact, bias, special interest, and the hiding of truth? And how do we do so without needing a guarantee that at the end of the day, the children of Republicans will stay Republicans, and the children of Democrats will be the Democrats that their Democratic parents want them to be? That our gods will be their gods, as it were. Without igniting our partisan-addicted country to the accusation that whoever advocates critical analysis is only critical, or, speaking as one of the wacky gaggle of Hollywood liberals, as most of you are already thinking, that I advocate teaching civics must be hiding a secret agenda. Let me tell you two things about that. First of all, I gaggle for no one. And second, I'm not a liberal. I am a libo, conservo, rado, middle of the roado. Just like you just haven't thought about it lately. Teaching civility. Civility is the oxygen required for all democracies, or else they will become poisoned and die. Die as this democracy will. If yelling and screaming and making fun of everyone's opinion becomes the norm in our culture, is it so terrible? After all, it's more entertaining than Robert's Rules of Orders or parliamentary procedure, right? No. Yelling and screaming, if they become the norm in actuality, weakens the central concept of democracy, which is the sharing of space of disparate opinion. Democracy means that people of unlike minds share political space, that it's okay to have a different opinion. That is democracy. If the only constant in public examination of the issues at hand is that the guy who disagrees with you is an idiot, unworthy even to finish his sentence and deserving only of being patronized, could that not be defined as fundamentally undemocratic? And how simple and easy all of our issues must be, since we don't analyze them, we don't ruminate over them, must not be so difficult. These matters of keeping pay and of firemen and policemen above the poverty line, or why the Twin Towers fell, or forming a more perfect union, or establishing justice, providing common defense, ensuring domestic tranquility for ourselves and our posterity. It must be simple stuff, because we don't educate our young with any real care and concern to those issues. Now, I am not a conspiracy freak or cynic, but I believe that we teach our young what we wish them to know, and we don't teach them what we don't wish them to know, so that they learn to read and write and have basic arithmetic, and everything else is up for grabs. Geography, the arts, sciences, languages, these are subject to local budget pressures and fads and temporary issues. And civics is gone. Civics is gone and folded into history, indistinguishable from stories of glory and myth, and not as the laboratory of critical analysis or the maintenance of Republican Democracy 101, as if really knowing how to work the Constitution and the Bill of Rights really wasn't really worthy of study. Of course, we don't teach these inescapably necessary tools that allow us to maintain and comprehend this complex and intricate and ever-changing political process. And that's either because it's way too difficult for our kids, or there's only so much time in the day, or we've done pretty good so far. That must be the reasoning. And that's about as silly a way to run a government as you can possibly find. We are far more intelligent than that. And the only way we can swallow it is through denial or hypnosis. Now, I don't hold rude, contemptuous, shouting political shows accountable for all the major damage to our culture. Not all. That would be kind of like the grumblings that losers make, excuse makers, but it is difficult these days to find where the opposite values are supported, like patience and thinking things through, and the notion that there are consequences to our actions, that wrong-headed action is more damaging than taking the time to learn something and understanding something. These values are pretty much gone from all parts of society, or am I missing something? He is a doer is applauded. Some small timid voice pops up, yes, but he's doing the wrong thing, and fingers start pointing, and ridicule starts rising, and those people who might think that things could be more complex, they quail. They sputter into silence, don't they? And not because they're wrong or someone else is right, but that the culture just doesn't support the exercise anymore. Take your time. Consider your options. Get it right. Families and schools don't hold these things up very well. Holding a dissenting opinion is scorned by parents and children, schools, states, churches, the media. Who in their right mind could have the moxie to dissent when everyone, including the people in this room, no longer tolerate dissent, or applaud it, or hold it up as an American ideal? At the climax of a film called Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, how many of you here have not seen Mr. Smith Goes to Washington? Okay. Jimmy Stewart looks over to Senator Payne, played by Claude Rains, and he looks him in the face and says, with despair and love and respect commingled, "I guess this is one of those lost causes." You remember lost causes, don't you, Mr. Payne? They're the only ones worth fighting for. You said that, and I love you for it, like my father did. Well, I'm not going to give up this lost cause, no matter how many lies this chamber is filled up with. Somebody is going to believe me. The causes that are worth fighting for, even if you know you'll lose. All of us grew up on that film, Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. We all thought as we grew up that we watched it as if we were Jimmy Stewart. I submit with all respect that many of us in this room have become Senator Payne. A tragic character with noble ambitions and a noble past, but so embedded in pursuits of questionable value that he's lost his way and foregone all virtuous ambition. It is the idea that certain things are more important than victory, and that no party should find itself defending the morally indefensible. Today, I was told a bit of news. A resolution being studied in the offices of the Senate by both parties that would have ensured that civics was firewalled and protected because it was an urgent necessity for people who sought to rule themselves, didn't make it out of the offices of Senator Harry Byrd or Mitch McConnell, the two parties' main men. They couldn't agree on pre-partisan values like due process of law or freedom of speech. It was designed to deal with all the principles we fought for before there were political parties, only Americans, and they found that it was just too tough to get it done. So, if the president cuts the budget for civics, and the governor of Maryland reaches into the curriculum of his state and takes out civics and the money to fund it, and nobody asks him why, and if the Senate says it isn't important enough to pass a non-binding resolution, maybe this American exceptionalism is silly. Like the education we end up giving our children, whose education we are emptying. Our kids can't sew or cook or hammer a nail. And of course, we shouldn't waste our time with due process, law, or the other virtues that Washington fought for. Now we can't get our congressmen or senators to put their names on a document supporting the United States Constitution. And that's a fact. So why don't we really simplify it and make it a resolution favoring intelligence over stupidity? And I'll take a big money bet that they turn that down too. Now you can dismiss me all you wish. You have the right to your opinion. This is America, after all. But on my mother's life and on the love I have for my children, I say to you, I am not speaking for so petty a thing as the Democratic Party. I am speaking for my nation that will be handed to my kids and theirs. My nation, which is unique in its gifts to mankind. The country that ended a 10,000-year-old curse that said, you and yours will never rise. You're a serf, and your grandchildren will be serfs, and my heel will always be on your neck. And that was the truth of the world until America said, wait a minute. Wait just a minute. If you can manage to get here, if you can make the journey, if you've got guts and discipline and effort, you can rise by merit and brains in your lifetime. And if you rise, no guarantee, but if you rise and fail, you can rise again. And no one will tell you that you can't go here and you can't go there. This is the single most important message in the history of human civilization. And everyone in every corner of the world knows that America is a political miracle, safe haven, and a second chance. And the only ones that don't know that are our own kids, because we don't teach it anymore. We will lose this country, and we will lose this last best hope of mankind. Lincoln said the only ones that will ever beat us is us, and he's pretty much seeing the truth. I remember when I was a little boy and a young man, what it was like to be totally in love with America. Not just to the fact of its existence, but to its aspiration, to what it meant, to what it sought. Don't kid yourself. America does mean something in this world. It meant, and we knew it, that whether we were critical or not, America meant in its society with all of its problems, and in its commerce with all of its sins, and in its government with all of its blunders, America is the finest, most appropriate answer to the question, how can people live together and honor freedom and justice and opportunity? And America does not happen by itself. If you don't work it, you lose it. We have the opportunity to establish for the first time an institute for the study of the Enlightenment values that permeate our Constitution. We have established a curriculum for the study of civics that is practical for all subjects. And we're going to tie it up into intellectual property and gift it to the school system of the United States. And we have also created a way for what you learn in civics classes to be brought into the culture. We've created an American history play competition, among all the regional theaters of the country. There are 75 theaters. We've approached 25. We've gotten 25. And we'll get them all. And someone at the end of a season will write a play and get a phone call. And then drop dead of a heart attack because he just won $300,000. And if that isn't a reason to try to write a play, I don't know what is. Okay. We have the first coherent, cohesive assault on the enemy of the light, the darkness of stupidity and ignorance. We're not just standing here bemoaning and whimpering. We've got an action plan that can make us win. We need your help. America doesn't happen by itself. It needs your money. It needs your love. It needs your love. Thank you.
Richard has agreed to take some questions and have a little discussion here. And and I'll moderate that. Are there any questions here in this audience? And we have a microphone that we would like to deliver near you so that the people watching on television can hear it as well as those in this room. So if there are questions, let fire. We have one here.
Can you hear me now? Yeah, thank you for your speech. I also think the Dreyfuss initiative should be renamed the Byrd initiative. So we'll tolerate that for a bit. At any rate, I think you're probably going to get a lot of pushback from the top, from the officials. There's several of the last few elections that could have turned if everybody who had wanted to vote and been qualified to vote had been allowed to vote. We know that a lot of people were excluded from the polls in Florida, tens of thousands. None of them heard about it. They showed up at the polls and were allowed to vote. And the same thing in Ohio. There are no voting machines. And I think if people knew the civics, were well educated, there'd be an effective pushback against that. But there are the engineers of elections who know how to suppress votes and can win that way. And some of them are in power.
Do you have a question?
So they're going to be pushing back.
Do you have a question?
First of all, the Byrd idea is great. And the only reason I put my name on it was because I'm a celebrity, which is a two-edged sword. On one side, you never have to wait in line for a table at a restaurant. And nothing else about it is good. But it's recognizable, and so we put it there to grab your attention. And the Byrd amendment is just as good, and he deserves it. And I was lucky enough to sit and talk with him for a while before he died, and it was great. Of course there'll be pushback, especially now, because we've reached an iconic level of idiocy and stupidity in public life that is beyond my ability to articulate. And if anyone has been watching the news lately or the news of the last 15 or 20 years, you know that we have enshrined common senselessness. And it only takes educated, intelligent, thinking, and devoted people to stop them. That's a high mountain. But I knew when I started this that it would take a long time most of my friends were already addicted to immediate gratification, and they wanted it done yesterday. It's going to take 20 years for everyone to understand what we've lost and how to gain it back. I know that. I'm still here, and so are you.
Another question?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Dreyfuss, for your work. It's incredibly important. My name is Robert Mahaffey. I'm with the Rural School and Community Trust, which advocates on behalf of rural schools, particularly high poverty places around the country. One of our huge challenges is that rural schools are forced to close because of budget cuts, lack of resources. So we put children on buses for 2-3 hours a day to get back and forth from school. By the time they get to school, they're tired. Teachers are stressed. We're pushing for more civic engagement in schools. We're now in the throes of the reauthorization of the Elementary and Secondary Education Act that's cutting funds for schools. How can you use your voice to really put pressure on people to know that rural schools need to be protected?
First of all, you're going to be saved by the magic of high tech, because high tech will deliver unto the rural and the poor monitors and iPads and high tech fun, and they will be cheap enough, and they will spread to the people who normally would get on a bus for 2.5 hours. They won't have to get on that bus. And they'll be delivered the finest teachers, the finest authors in the world. And imagine this. Those of you who remember the Marshall Plan, 13,000 years of warfare and costly blood didn't teach us anything until World War I made us realize that there was a limit to how much blood we could shed. And we always knew that whoever lost first, the one who won, lost second. That's why every empire ended. And so someone came up with the idea for the Marshall Plan, the most unpopular piece of legislation in the history of the country. Now it's a masterpiece. And it was simply that we built up the economies and governments of our former foes until they were smart enough and strong enough to create their own industries, their own jobs, and they could afford to buy our products, and we became the richest country in the world. And that's what's going to happen with the high-tech industry. Guys like Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, may he do well, are going to realize that they not only have a market to make money, but they can prove the point of capitalism and democracy being perfect partners. And Steve Jobs will be studied 100 years from now as the perfect capitalist because of that. If Steve Jobs had opened up Apple in 1947 in Dresden, he would have gone chapter 11 no matter how good his product was. But now we can offer our own kids something that we never expected ever to give them. The splendid pleasure of learning for learning's sake. Because high tech is just so much fun. I had to be dragged away from the Microsoft table when I first saw it. And now there's a browser called Sixth Sense. And Sixth Sense actually connects by ideas and concepts. And I asked the Indian inventor, can this machine deliver themes and ideas that the user isn't looking for or anticipating? And he said, oh, yes, indeed, sir. And I turned to the owner of that company and I said, you're not gonna be in the resume business and the job business. You're gonna be at the core of a revolution in education, because in 20 years, kids will run to school in the morning because they know that's where the fun is. And education itself is a doorway into something that most people think is absolutely impossible, and that's the splendid pleasure of learning for learning's sake. There's no more fabulous feeling than when you read and learn something, or talk amongst your friends, and you learn something new, or say something well. You can feel a stroke of joy and sensual pleasure go right up the back of your neck. And that's the theory of evolution saying, come on, more. And that's what kids will have. And we will have a society of younger people who know, you want to have fun, let's go to school. No joke.
Richard, we have a question from, we have two overflow rooms here, since our auditorium isn't big enough to accommodate all those who want to see you tonight. And from one of the overflow rooms, when they're watching on television, the question comes, what do you see as the biggest damage to the United States Constitution?
Well, the biggest damage is this. I spoke to the University of Virginia, and I asked 900 kids what was revolutionary about our Revolutionary War. 900 hands went up. And one kid said, independence from Great Britain. And I said, nope. What else you got? And 900 hands came down. And they said, I don't know, what? And I said, it was the only time that a political, powerful place, a nation, had said that the ruler and the ruled could be one thing. That the people could be the final arbiter of political power, and that we could govern ourselves. And that was revolutionary, and if we had been a European power, they would have killed us to the last man. And I mean it. They would have made sure that not one American lived to get out of the room, because that was a threat. In the old order that preceded us, 6 people in 800 years were accused of capital crimes in all of Europe. 6 people in 800 years. That's the get out of jail card free that the aristocracy had. And we gave them a legal code that was fair and for all, and that no one was above the law. And that was revolutionary. And what damage has been done is that special interests, some of them named Rupert Murdoch, and oil industries have twisted, bribed, lied, and distorted the basic messages of the Constitution so much that we don't believe that we have the right to outrage, we don't have the right to accountability, we don't have the right to ask a question, and we don't have the right, period. And that is absolutely turning history on its head. Because not only do we have that right, we have that right in spades. And we have it all the time. We have the right to ask a doctor, a contractor, a banker, a mortgage lender for the truth. And we get to sue him if he lies. And they've talked us out of knowing any of that by removing civics from the curriculum and not explaining why did we have a war of independence. What were we worried about? We wanted our own sovereign nation. We wanted to be sovereign in our own lives. Top that.
Good question. Sure.
Mr. Dreyfuss, thank you so much for being here tonight, starting this initiative. It's so important to me and everybody else in this country. I'm with West Virginia Communication Outreach of Jefferson County, and it's an outreach group that tries to bring Jefferson County closer to Charleston. I went back to school as an adult, and I even did an internship with the New York State Assembly. And the man who ran the New York State Assembly program for the interns said to me, "You're too old to be this idealistic." And of course he was kidding. But as I get even older now, and you're trying to reach young people and get them to understand the foundation of our country, how do you get the parents and the adults of these children to stop being so cynical? Because that's what's starting to happen to me. I'm becoming what this joke was all about. I'm becoming cynical now, and I'm trying to figure out a way to not be cynical.
I once told a group of supers that I wanted to put empty coffee cans on the desks of history classes and have kids fill up the coffee cans as an expression of what they wanted. And what they wanted was simple. I want every history teacher to put on their wall a sentence that says, "We want a more excellent training in how to run the country before it's our turn to run the country, or else someone else will run the country who is not mandated to do that." In other words, thieves. And I want every kid in every history class to sign that piece of paper. And I found out that it's illegal now to put those coffee cans on the desks in any school because it's politically incorrect. I got a call the next day from the head of the Girl Scouts because I had mentioned in my speech that the Girl Scouts were a perfect metaphor for America. And she called and asked if I would speak to them. And I did. And they were the ones that told me it was illegal to put the coffee cans on the desks. And then she said, "But it's not illegal for us to stand on the sidewalk outside the school and hold the coffee cans." And I said, "Are you volunteering to do that?" And she said, "Yep." Because the Girl Scouts are inclusive. The Boy Scouts are exclusive. So the Girl Scouts morally have one step up. So the way you do it is that parents need just their kids to tap them on the shoulder and say, "We want a better education. We want a more rigorous training in how to run the country in a realistic way, not just the three branches of Congress or whatever. I want to know how to feel like owning this country before I graduate high school. I want to know how to spot a shoplifter and a pickpocket before he gets near me so I can grab him and send him to prison." When was the last time you ever heard of a villain being punished? Not lately. It feels really good. Punishing the guilty and applauding the heroes, and those are feelings that can't be described. And I want the kids to tap the parents to tap the supers, and then the supers will be able to turn to the Congress and say, give us more money, and don't tell us that we don't know what we're talking about. We got the support of all these kids. And I'll go one step further. I get 1 million signatures, and I'll ask for a civil strike. I'll ask for 30 minutes where all of you and your kids do nothing. You don't go to school, you don't go to work, you don't buy anything, you don't make a phone call. 30 minutes. And you time it so that it's the same 30 minutes in every time zone. And that way you show the potency of the potential of that political power. And the elected officials will sit up and pay attention. You don't ask for more, you don't want to hurt the economy. But 30 minutes says, we have a stake here in this country, just like you. Pay attention.
In the back there, the gentleman, please.
Right here?
Yes. Wait for the microphone, please.
I have a,
Microphone here.
I have
Okay, go ahead.
I have a comment and a question on the Constitution. I noticed the title of this presentation is The Constitutional Convention and the Miracle of Democracy. My comment is Catherine Drinker Bowen wrote a book called The Miracle of Philadelphia about the Constitutional Convention. And she does a remarkable job in capturing the character of George Washington in that convention. And I commend that to everybody. My question is this. More recently, we've heard people comment or state that the Constitution is a living document. The implication often is that it can be changed rather easily. It can be changed by a majority in Congress, right? All right? Anyway, comment on that if you would.
Justice Scalia said, anyone who thinks that the Constitution is a living document is an idiot. I'm an idiot. And I believe the Constitution is a living document, and if it's not, why are we spending all this time on it? If it's a dead document, and we're just congratulating ourselves on something we did 300 years ago, then we should be spending a lot less time on that. The fact is, I would ask Justice Scalia to read the preamble aloud, because the preamble to the Constitution is all verbs. It's all activities that must be done, not having been done. It wasn't written, we the people of the United States having already formed a more perfect union. It doesn't say that at all. It says that we have to work this document. And the miracle of Philadelphia by Catherine Drinker Bowen was that they created a document that had such living, breathing elasticity that it could extend itself over 300 million people and still work. And that's either sorcery or intelligence. But don't forget, the preamble of the Constitution is not the operating manual, a description of the how of the three branches of government and how to pass a bill through Congress. The preamble is the spirit of the Constitution, the purpose, the meaning, the smell, and the excellence of the idea of self-government, not the manual.
We have another question from the overflow room, and I'll read it in its entirety. Mr. Dreyfuss, your plan to reintroduce civics into our school system is brilliant, and will result in our children's America being more like our grandfather's America. However, how shall we educate our fellow adults so we don't have 25 years of constitutional decay waiting for my 3, 5, and 7-year-old?
Well, you'd be surprised at how much adults can learn from their kids. And I've always felt, since the 2000 election, I've always felt that we were just so close, that we were just waiting for strong, wise leadership. And then we would go where it took us. And I'm not afraid of the adults. I'm not afraid of the kids. I'm afraid of the entrenched interests. I'm afraid of the media buyers. I'm afraid that you don't realize how much you've already lost. Because if Viacom, CBS, can own CBS and American Tobacco, then American Tobacco can call 60 Minutes and say, we don't wish to be investigated, and that's the end of that. So we have no investigatory journalism. We've already lost the idea that when television was born, if we had called ABC Disney ABC, we would have been laughed at. Because we knew. That immediately meant that ABC couldn't investigate Disney. And we've got to firewall our journalists, and we have to remember that it was a clear statement, pristine in its clarity, that the news information departments of the networks were not meant to be profit centers. They were kept apart from the demand for profit. Now, we seek profit from everything up to and including counting the bugs in this room. We seek profit at all times from all things. We have distorted our lives because of it. And the Supreme Court last year, when it passed Citizens United, said that not only are corporations more important than human beings in any legal description, they are more important than human beings in any examination of governance theories which are only about human beings and not corporations. Corporations don't live, breathe, give birth, and die. People do. Corporations can't be punished. People can. And so, when we passed the open door of Citizens United, we allowed for the possibility of foreign corporations being allowed to give an uninhibited amount of money to presidential campaigns. Now, we thought we had a problem when $2 billion was spent on a presidential campaign. You watch $50 billion being spent, and you won't have the right to trace it or audit it. And it will be spent by OPEC, and Mercedes-Benz, and British Petroleum, and you will be up a tree. And the ritual amount that humans are allowed to give to their own governance is so limited and so small that it is only a ritual amount. It has no possibility of impacting a campaign, and it is no more a part of our political life than it is a ritual dance. And you had better start to feel the dread, because your children will come to you soon and say, how could you have abandoned us like this? How could you have so deliberately made us inadequate. Because life is not pro-American. Life is life. And competition overseas is ruthless. And we won't be smart enough to compete. We won't be smart enough, we won't have settled. And we will be outmaneuvered. And we will be outthought in the military. I asked an admiral, does a stupid military offer you any advantage? He said, of course not. I said, well, 75% of the people who apply to get into the military are too stupid to pass the test. And that's from Secretary Gates. So the ones who do get in can't understand an order and are certainly incapable of writing one. So you better feel a little dread creeping up the back of your neck, because we've, for some mysterious reason, set out on a course to make our children dumber than hell. They can't sew, they can't cook, they can't hammer a nail, they don't understand due process or what it costs. So it's easy to turn it into selective due process. And you watch the ones you love the most be buffeted by the winds of fate and lose. We're gonna lose. We're not gonna win. Unless we take this country in our hands, we're gonna lose. And we'll be a memory. I don't want that to happen.
We're gonna take two more questions, and we have this gentleman over here.
Hi, you brought up the Citizens United case, and I just wanted to draw on that theme a little further. I'd spent a number of years working on Capitol Hill for a United States Senator, and had witnessed over time a disproportionate amount of time being spent on campaign finance and raising money, and I think that's one of the reasons why he finally retired. And I've talked to several current and former members who are saying that they're increasingly spending more and more time raising money, and it's taking, I mean, they won't admit this publicly, but it's causing them to take their eye off the ball a little bit and spending time on the business of legislation and representative democracy, right? I'm just interested in your comment on that, and you know, Citizen United in particular, what would you recommend we do to address that?
I had the great compliment of being allowed to address the 50 Chief Justices of the state Supreme Courts in Anchorage, Alaska, sometime before Sarah Palin took over the governorship, or maybe afterwards. I'd have to ask her, but I don't think she'd know. I had 50 Chief Justices in front of me, and I said, I'm going to ask you a question, and I want you to tell me whether I'm crazy. I want to warn you that my father's a lawyer, my uncles are lawyers, my sister's a lawyer. I got more lawyers in my family. I got my own bar association. And I've been raised within the law. Here's the question. If you received a notice from your television news outlet, and it said that from now on, traffic congestion news would be on a $4 surcharge, you'd hit the roof, right? Because it's news, and you need it. Well, so is politics. Politics is news, and you cannot profit from it. You are obligated to cover it because it's news. But you can't do now what they do now, which is to step in, fire the League of Women Voters, change the rules so that there is no debate, let the White House or whoever is in power set the rules, and you have politicians saying statements that you know already exactly what they're going to say, and they know exactly exactly how you're gonna respond. And it's like a ritual dance. And they spend oodles of money on this stuff, and the networks then charge them those oodles and receive it as profit. And now there's a niche class in Washington of media advisors, and they're not paid high salaries, they are paid cuts of the TV ad buy, which means that the losers in a presidential race can make 14 million bucks. And if that isn't a conflict of interest, I'll eat my hat. And the law being the law, if they say it's not a conflict, it's not a conflict. But it is. And what I would do is ask for a constitutional amendment that absolutely separated money, television, and politics. The technology of television is different than any other in this area. It's as expensive as they wish it to be. It's where all the money goes that you're complaining about. And the House of Representatives, by the way, spends over 90% of their time only on raising money, so they're not representing anybody like the people. They're raising money. And the press, which could stand in and represent us, has all rolled over and sold itself to the highest bidder, so that even Meet the Press and all the other supposedly high-end integrity shows play softball and never ask a rude question, ever. And when I addressed the National Press Club and said that to them, Tim Russert said to me, "Why am I a villain? This is my country I'm talking about, and I take it real seriously." I said to Tim, "You're a villain because you stopped asking the question for the 4th time. That's your job. Your job is to be rude. Your job is to speak truth to power. And when you let the president or the White House or the spinmeisters have the last 10 minutes of the show, you're sold out." And I saw John Edwards, before he imploded, say something so stupid on Meet the Press. This is what he said: "If I had known that there were no weapons of mass destruction when the president asked for emergency war powers, I would have given them to him anyway because Saddam was a bad guy." And Tim Russert's response was, "Who do you think has the bigger war chest, Clinton or Obama?" And I wrote a letter to Tim and I said, the next time an American senator reveals his complete ignorance of his senatorial obligations under the Constitution, I would expect that your response would be more pointed. And then I said to him that day, when the one person who followed the press rule of being rude to power was exiled, and he interrupted and said, "What could we have done?" And I said, "You didn't have to show up at the next press conference, and it all would have been over." If the White House press corps had said to the president, no, I don't have to sit here and listen to your lies. If you're going to insist on lying and lying and lying, I don't have to hear." And they would have sat up and they would have stopped. So, the press has emptied itself, education has emptied itself. Our parents don't know what to say to their kids because we don't know what our own values are anymore. We used to wake up in the morning and know why America was great. We used to know who we were and why we were who we were. Now, good men get up in the morning and do bad things and don't know the difference. And they have to know that, or your kids will not know that, and their coaches won't know it, and your pastors won't know it. You've got to know what Western civilization holds up as the Enlightenment era. The Enlightenment means the light of intelligence. And the history of the world is so dark and bloody and cruel that it's only a twinkle here and there that we see. Because the darkness never dies, it just waits. And then it bites you on the neck and never lets go. And that can happen here just as easily as it can happen in Afghanistan or Iraq or anywhere else. It's happened before, it'll happen again. It's up to you. And it's either write a check, which is a valid thing, especially since we need the money. Write a check for an institute that has never existed before, that holds up and studies and gives scholastic support to the values of the Enlightenment. And do it right here at Happy Retreat. So you'll have more tourists running around West Virginia than you've ever had before. And West Virginia, by the way, is the spirit of the United States in miniature. No other state ever fought so hard to stay in the Union than West Virginia. And it's something to be proud of.
We have one last question over here, please, and then we will wrap it up.
I really applaud your urging people to stand up to corporate power. And I was wondering if you will be in Freedom Plaza on October 6th as part of the October2011.org, beginning of their nonviolent resistance to corporate power.
That's the first I've heard.
Well, it's October2011.org. Hundreds of small organizations and some national organizations have signed on, and that's their mission. Human need instead of human greed.
Well, I'm going to say one thing. I'm going to be with you in spirit, at least. But hopefully, I'm going to be here at Happy Retreat cutting a ribbon. And I want to establish truly the first institute to study enlightened values that has ever been. Common sense, reason, logic, clarity of thought. I want to study that here. And I can bring scholars from all over the world who want to come here because you're so close to DC, they can make money while they're studying.